Okay, so now we're going to talk about cycle time, and this is one of the things I really like about Kanban. I think that often we just don't measure enough in what we do, and so it's really hard. We don't apply data, and we don't use data to make decisions, and that's one of the things I think Scrum's lacking, because you go for 2 weeks, and then you measure, right? Versus measuring continually. So let's talk about what goes on a card. So in this case, we have a story card, ability to assign to the system. In the bottom left, we might have a card create date. So over here, when it gets to the analysis, the card got created all the way up down the backlog. Right? As soon as somebody came up with that great idea, we put a card date. It's kind of like a born on date on beer, right? How fresh is the idea? We might have a stage that says, wow, when we get close to WIP, let's revalidate that this is still, a fresh idea and a worthy idea. So you could use it and say anything that's too old maybe just falls off the list. Okay. We now have a WIP start date. So over here in the analysis column, there's a post-it note down here, and it says, whenever a card comes into this column, you're supposed to write the date in the middle of the card. Okay. So we're tracking now, when did it actually get to our WIP board? Okay. Over here, we have a done date in the bottom right, and that happens over here, right? Over here, when done is automate test complete, there's a note that says write the date in the bottom right-hand corner of the card and update the cycle time, okay? So every time the tester gets it to done, the tester's gonna walk over here and they're gonna go to their cycle time chart. If you notice, we called it out, we're measuring WIPs start to QA done. We have a limit of 22. We're measuring 22 things. We have about 22 things on that board. And it's first in, first out. So when this card comes in, and it has a date on the bottom now, I take the card, I go over here, I delete this data point, I add a new data point, card number 123, took 14 days, right, to get done. Now, I'm gonna recalculate, right, my average, and I'm gonna come up with a new average. And I'm going to realize, okay, well, that's decreased our average, down to 13 days now, okay, or increased. And so now that I have a new cycle time, I can go back here and I can update this and say, wow, my wait time from here to done, to QA done, from the time it hits the WIP start, it took us 13 days to get there. So what did I just measure, right? Think about it. Right? I measured, it did analysis, then it sat and waited. Did development, then it sat and waited, right? And then it got tested, right? And it got to done for test. So how do you measure that in waterfall? Right? How do you even estimate that? Okay? You can type in the box if you think you know the answer, right? You don't, right? You pad it, right? You hope you can add 30% to your project to account for all the wait states that you can't predict, right? Every time a knowledge work has to stop and that inventory is sitting there collecting dust, right? Because that idea is getting older, right? That's wasteful, right? And like, what happens over here? Like, what happens if we would have kept throwing these cards over here, and now the tester has to test something, and I go and I say, hey, Josh, I have a defect, and it took me 2 weeks to find that defect. You're going to say, God, I wish you would have told me within the hour or 2 hours that I coded it. So because my head was in the code, it's complex, right? So it's going to be cheaper for me to fix that if I reduce the delay, because now I have to go back and relearn the code and remember what I did and how to fix it. And so we're just driving cost up, right? We're actually driving this delay up. So this is the beauty of Kanban, in my opinion. We measure the cost. So when I tell you that, hey, when we estimate and say, hey, it's a medium card, it's about 4 days of work, right? It might take 14 days to get that 4 days of work done, because things are getting delayed for knowledge reasons, because we aren't managing knowledge transfer efficiently, and things are and cost is compounding. So that's why I like cycle time. You can also do cycle time to measure external teams. So let's say I have a card coming through development, and we're partnering with Lean Dog. Okay, because Lean Dog, we're outsourcing to them some skills that we just don't have. So they're doing some Ruby workforce, per se. So now I can say, you know what? Every time I want you to write on the back of the card, every time that you are going to send something to Lean Dog, right, the date it went to Lean Dog, and then when it comes back from Lean Dog, I want you to write the date it came back. Okay, and so now I can create another cycle time chart, call it Lean Dog, right? And say, all right, you know what? Every time we get a card done with Lean Dog, we're gonna measure how long did it take Lean Dog to do it. So now I'm not gonna call John up and say, hey, listen, Lean Dog's not done what they say. Because listen, when we came up with this agreement, you told me you could turn this work around in a week, but we've been tracking it, and you guys are taking like a week and a half or 2 weeks. So how can we be better partners so that that doesn't happen? And maybe we look at the process and we say, you know what? Back when you have your 3 Amigas meeting back at analysis, why don't we add a rule here? If Lean Dog, you're going to call somebody from Lean Dog so that they can participate in that meeting. That way, we're going to be much more efficient when it comes to us, right? And we're going to knock it out of the park, right? So, you know, now I'm using empirical data to have a conversation. I'm not just saying, hey, you guys are horrible, you don't turn things around, so you're constraining my project. We can say, hey, let's tune our workflow so that we can optimize working together. Some people even do lead time, like if we're working on innovation with a company. So ideation, right? So you have another chart saying, okay, from the time we came up with that idea, right, that we need to add this feature, the card create date, how long before, not QA done, but card create date to production, okay? So downstream, we could have boards to the right of here that are, you know, getting ready for production, whatever we need to do, working with our training teams, working with our sales teams, whatever we need to do to ship that thing. From the time we made the promise to a customer or somebody we were going to build it and put the idea in the hopper, how long before we actually deployed it and started getting business value from it, okay? And so if you're in an organization where you have to stay innovative, right, and say you're a greeting card company and Care Bears are hot again, and you got to change your market analysis shows you need to pivot to that before the next holiday, right? Then that market analysis is really important to measure how far from ideation to done, okay, and production done. So that's cycle time. I think that another thing you can do over here is you could say, all right, well, if our previous average was 18, and I did a calculation and it went to 13. So if we have a standard deviation of plus or minus, call it 5, so it changes by 5 days, right? Now I'm going to have an explicit policy, and I'm going to say, anytime we have a standard deviation of plus or minus 5 days, I want you to take that card and go and put it on our retrospective board. Okay? So why did this card take 5 days longer than previous cards, right? Why is our average changing so much? So now I can take that card and say, oh, you know what? That was because that card went to Lean Dog, right? And maybe we need to put a policy to measure Lean Dog so we can start measuring that. And maybe, or, you know, wow, we didn't realize when we estimated these things that there was a whole new skill that we were going to have to adapt, or this framework didn't work. So it slowed us down in development because we all had to pick up a new product tool and learn a new technology to do that. So maybe we should look back at our backlog and realize that all those medium cards are not large cards, or all these small cards are now medium cards, right? So we learned something, right? And that's what happens when you're doing technology. You're going to discover things that make things more complex or less complex, or you're going to discover an external dependency or something that changed the size of your cards, but you didn't necessarily update the size. So it's a much better way to do retrospective. If you get to the end of a sprint in Scrum, one of the things that's struggling is like, oh, we went from 20 points to 10 points, and why? Well, we had 12 or 20 people on our team all working a hard 40, and we aren't sure why. We just didn't get as much done, but we actually don't have any way to actually measure it. So when I see an anomaly, I actually measure it now and actually use data to make decisions. Okay? So that's cycle time.